Well, happy Sabbath to you all. Everything has changed, as you know, that we're not even able to tape at the church anymore. And so here we are in my office at home, done the best we could to put a little studio here together. But it's still Sabbath, it's still Easter weekend, and I'm excited to give you a message. God bless you wherever you are and whoever you are. And we'll just pray that this message will come through even in a different situation. So I'm going to give you a drama today. It's a little different way of presenting an Easter message. And I'm sure you've probably heard we're going to do another week of prayer. We did one a week ago, and then Pastor Kidros has been doing a Spanish service this last week. And now, starting tomorrow night, we'll do another week with English. 7 o'clock every night, you can go online to the website and have another message. We're going to do sort of last day events, all from a character of God perspective. We're not just going to do a chart and go through all the details, but we will deal with the issues that are really important on the character of God as we move through. And boy, everyone thinks that we're at least closer to the last day. This is a part of the drama as the four angels of Revelation 7 begin to let go. We're moving into the last days. So the drama for today is I would like to represent the character of Pilate. So I invite you to just get into the Easter mode and the story of the cross. I am Pilate. I was the Roman governor for 10 years. I had a palace down on the beach. I'm a Roman. I can have anything I want. I could do whatever I want. Money, food, music, plays, women, whatever I wanted, I could have it. I'm a Roman governor. You probably heard the story about the Roman legionnaire who was in charge of a galley ship. All the men down below, someone came down and said, I have good news and bad news. What's the good news? The captain has decided that we can all have ice cream for lunch today. What's the bad news? He wants to go water skiing after lunch. I was a Roman. I could decree whatever I want. I was asleep in the middle of the night when all of a sudden one of my soldiers came and tapped me on the shoulder. He said, there's a crowd outside. I think you better come. So I got dressed and I came outside into the judgment hall. Here was this huge crowd, 1,000+ people. And here were the leaders, the priests of Israel, all standing there in their gorgeous robes. And then here was this man, dressed in white. I had not seen him before, but I'd heard of him. There was this revolutionary, whatever, crazy person who was going around and they said he did miracles and was walking on water and raising the dead. It's craziness. Here he was. I tried to do the right thing, play this right. I said, what charges are you bringing against him? They all started yelling. He's starting a revolution. He thinks he's the king. He's going to set up a kingdom. He's going to throw off the Romans. So I had to think. Why don't you judge him by your own laws? You know we can't crucify anybody, execute anybody. So I looked at him. He didn't look like a criminal. Looked into his eyes. Didn't look guilty. They had no evidence that they could back up. There was no testimony, nothing to back it up. What do you do when this man is innocent? But if I let him go, there will be a riot here. There's thousands of people here for Passover. It's a holiday. They're going to get mad and they're going to write a letter to Rome and I'll be in trouble with Rome and there's going to be a riot. What can I do? So I got the idea. I'll send him to Herod. So they packed him off to Herod. Herod lined up sick people. to try to get him to do a miracle to show whether he was really the one he said he was or not. He just stood there silent. Herod sent him back to me. I tried 3 times to just let him know he's innocent. I can't find anything wrong with him. But they weren't going to have that. What are you going to do? I tried to give them Barabbas. I said, what about Barabbas? When you have Jesus or Barabbas, they chose Jesus. So what do you want me to do with him? Crucify him. Oh, it's difficult. I can still hear it now, hearing that crowd shouting, crucify him, crucify him. I had him whipped. I thought maybe that would satisfy them and they'd be done with it. I could hear him being whipped. They brought him back to me. He's bleeding everywhere. He's horrible. He's been up all night. He looks terrible. I shouted, what do you want me to do with him? And they shouted out again, crucify him, crucify him. What are you going to do? Right about then, my wife sent me a note. And she says, have nothing to do with this man. I've had a terrible dream all night long with him. Have nothing to do with him. He's innocent. Now what am I going to do? I have a crowd out here shouting at me. He's an innocent man. I know he's done nothing wrong. But they want blood. They want him. And my wife says, have nothing to do with him. What am I going to do? They'll send a messenger to Rome and I'll be gone. My wife says to let him go. How can I let someone die when he did nothing wrong? But there's going to be a riot. And so I wimped out. I gave in to the crowd. I couldn't figure out a way to save us both, to save myself and to save him. So I saved myself. Isn't that what we all do? Save myself. I knew he was innocent. I didn't know what to do. And so with the crowd shouting there, I just gave in. I tried to protect myself. I called for a bowl of water and I washed my hands of this. I said, your blood be on you and your people. Okay, never mind. They took it. I tried to blame the Jews. It wasn't me. It's their fault, not me. They took him away, but I could hear him being whipped. I could hear them smashing the crown of thorns on him. I could hear as they took him up to the... I knew! I'm a Roman. I know what crucifixion means. I'll never get that night out of my mind. It's just one night in my life. But for the rest of my life, I'll never forget that night. I can't get it out of my system. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. But before you judge me too harshly, you think about this. I know what it says in the book of Revelation, that every eye will see him and those who pierced him. Now that's true, I did not actually pierce him myself, but I let him go and I knew what was going to happen. I did the best I could to try to make myself innocent, but I know better. But you be careful. Isaiah 53 says, surely he was pierced for our transgressions. Our transgressions. My transgressions, yes, but yours too. Yours too. You can't just put that all on me. If you sinned, then Jesus died for your sins. He was pierced because of your sins. I pierced him, you pierced him. I nailed him, you nailed him. I crucified him, you crucified him. You were there too. Careful before you judge me. You think about Barabbas. It's almost impossible to resist the pressure that came. But when you choose anything over Jesus, then you're doing what I did. I gave in to the crowd. I let them choose Barabbas over Christ. So every time you hear a crowd roaring and you give in to the crowd and you give in to something that you know is wrong, and you let anything be more important to you than Christ, that's a Pilate moment. You're right there guilty with me. Maybe you don't do it in front of 1,000 people yelling at you. Maybe you don't do it on the steps of the judgment hall. Maybe you don't end up in a movie. Maybe you don't get to see him be whipped and beaten because of you. But anytime you choose anything over Jesus, that's a Pilate moment. Same as me. Same as me. My wife sent me that note. That's the same as a still small voice that comes to you and to me, to everybody. You hear a little voice, you are ready to hurt somebody, I say some things that is going to hurt, and the little voice says, don't do that, don't hurt them. And you go right ahead. That's Pilate. That's me. That's what I did. You have a secret. You know you shouldn't pass it on. You promise somebody you wouldn't tell anybody, but you can't hold it in. And so you hear the voice saying, oh, don't do it, don't do it. But you say it anyway. That's the same. You're a young adult. You're out with a group on Saturday night and they begin to cross some lines and they're beginning to drink or do something. And there's a voice that says, don't do this. You don't want to be a part of this. And you go ahead and go along with the crowd. It's the same. It's the same. I beg you today, don't do what I did. Stand up for Jesus. When the crowd is shouting and you know what is right. I gave in. I gave in to the crowd. Play the political game. Stand up. Stand up for Jesus. Be proud to pray in a restaurant. I am a Christian and I pray to God. Don't be afraid to go to your boss and say, I can't work on the Sabbath. If you're trying to make a decision about getting baptized and you're trying to make a decision to get in front of everybody and do what's right, stand up for Jesus. Don't do what I did. Don't do what I did. Say in your heart, I am not ashamed of Christ. I asked, what is truth in the middle of all of that? What is truth? Who decides what truth is? There are some truths that maybe don't matter, but there are some truths that absolutely matter. There is a truth. When someone says the train is coming, you better get off the tracks. That's a truth that matters. If someone says that the house is on fire, you better get out. That's a truth that matters. There are some truths that matter. And here I was standing in front of God who is the truth. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I mocked it and I just said, what is truth? I turned away from truth himself. Don't do it. If God brings you truth that really matters to God, don't turn away. Don't turn away. And when your moment comes, which it surely will, and there's a crowd shouting in your ears somewhere, stand for Jesus. Stand. Stand. There's another way this might have gone. Yes, what happened, happened. Yes, I gave in. Yes, I let him get whipped. Yes, I let him get nailed. Yes, I let him be crucified. Yes, I gave in to the crowd. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. It happened. I knew better. I knew he was innocent. I knew he was who he said he was. I knew that I was doing what was wrong. Those questions couldn't get out of my mind. What is the truth? Probably was who he said he was. He's God. I killed God. I crucified him. I had him whipped. I couldn't stand it. After I let him go, I heard these rumors that maybe he was alive. Maybe he's alive. Maybe there's hope here. I went out into the city until I found one of them. I found Peter. And I sat down with Peter, but no one would know who I was. And I said, Peter, he let me talk to him. He said, let me tell you my story. After we left you there in the courtroom, we went to this trial, and I had told him that day that I would never give him up. I would never betray him. I would never deny him. And Jesus said, you will. And I swore to him that I wouldn't. But when I was challenged, and someone said, I think you're with him. You're one of them. I couldn't stand up for him. I gave him up. I said, I have nothing to do with him. I swore. And the moment I finished, I heard the cock crow, and I looked up, and there was the face of Jesus. How could I have done that? I ran out of the hall, and I wanted to die, heartbroken. But Jesus came back to life. We've seen him. He forgave me. If he forgives me, he'll forgive you. I denied him. You sent him to the cross. He'll forgive you. Unbelievable. He told me that at the cross, Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Forgive him. That included me. Forgive me for whipping him, beating him, smashing the crown of thorns on him, hanging him on a cross. He forgave me. And if he can forgive Peter and forgive me, he can forgive you. Whatever it is you've got back there in the background somewhere, he can forgive it all. It's all gone. My wife and I got baptized. And I stood up for him the rest of my life. I never gave up on him again from then on. And I absolutely believe that someday we will see him again on the clouds and we will walk into heaven. And believe me, when I finally get to see Jesus face to face, I am going to kneel down at his feet and I'm going to say 2 words that I have been waiting 2,000 years to be able to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But he forgave me. Now, for what I wish I had really done. What I wish I had done is when that time came, I'm in front of the crowd. And I heard the crowd yelling, and there he is standing in front of me. And I had this choice. Yes, I could give in to the crowd and not have the riot. Or I could do the right thing. I stood there looking at him, wondering if it maybe was true. Was it actually possible that he is who he said he was? That he did do those miracles. He did raise people from the dead. He did walk on water. Maybe. To look at him, it's hard to imagine that he's a criminal. He's not guilty. He's innocent. And all of a sudden, it just clicked in. It just clicked in. This man is who he said he was. It's true. I was just about ready to call for the bowl of water. And I was going to wash my hands of the whole business. And I looked and saw my wife standing behind a pillar. And I decided in that moment, I was going to go against who I had been my whole life. I had been a political person. I had gone along with the crowd. Whatever would help me go farther in my career, I did it. But in that moment, I decided I am going to take a stand. For once in my life, I'm going to do the right thing. And I stood up in front of that crowd and I said, now hear this. This man is innocent. This man is innocent. He has done nothing wrong. We cannot crucify a man who is innocent. We can't do this. How do you know he isn't who he said he was? He did great miracles. The crowd began to shout at me. We're going to write a letter to Rome about you. We're going to kill you. You're never going to survive this. I said, I didn't care. I felt more free than I had felt my whole life. I closed the door. I brought him. I took him back to my back room. We bathed him. I had people clean up all the wounds that had been done. And I said to him, I believe you who you are, said you are. I believe you. He was so kind with me. I took 1,000 soldiers and I gave them, and I said, you go to Herod. I don't have jurisdiction now. I can't set you free. I'm going to send you to Herod, but I believe you. And you know what happened? They took him to Herod. Herod did what he did. And Herod had him crucified. But it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. It was Herod. My wife and I got into a disguise. No one knew who we were, but we were in the crowd as we followed him up, carrying the cross up to the mountain. We were in the crowd. We watched them nail him to the cross. We were there. We watched them hang him on the cross. We watched. We heard the 7 last words that he gave. We heard, Father, forgive them. We heard, it is finished. We saw the thunder and the lightning, and we saw it all. We saw as they brought him down and put him in the grave. We were there. We were committed to him by then. That amazing thing, as the rumor began to go around on Sunday morning, my wife said, I think it's possible he's going to live again. Why don't we go? So we got into our disguise again and we went through the crowd, through the early morning. We were way back on another part of the hill. We saw it. We saw it all. We saw the Roman guard fall apart. We saw the stone get rolled away. And we saw Jesus come alive and walk out of there. We saw it. It's good enough for me. You don't want to believe it from anyone else, but I was there. I am the one who was there on the trial. And I saw him come out. That night we went to the upper room. We found the upper room. They let us in of all things. We went into the upper room. We asked the disciples a lot of questions. And then when that was all over, I looked at my wife. She looked at me. And we did it. We became disciples of Christ. And all of a sudden, there he was. There he was, the risen Christ. He walked through the door. We got to be with him. He embraced us. He welcomed us. We followed him. We were part of the group that got to spend 40 days down with him by the seashore, listening to every word he had to say. We were there on top of the Mount Olives when Jesus rose and went into the sky and said he would be back someday for us. We were in the upper room when the Holy Spirit got poured out in tongues of fire on all of us. We received it too. I was on the platform when Peter gave his speech and brought in 3,000 people. I was there. I wasn't a Roman governor anymore, but I was so much better. I was a follower of Christ. I was a follower of Christ. Now, my friends, If I can step out of the role just for a little bit before we're done. You think of some of the movies that have been made in our culture where people stand. At the last moment of Dead Poet Society, there is a moment where the English students stand on their desk to honor Robin Williams, their English teacher. He's been fired, but as he comes in to get his last few things and he's on his way out, one by one they stood up on their desk to give him honor. In the movie God Is Not Dead, the teacher makes every one of them sign a statement to say that God is dead. There is no God except one. And he says, you're going to fail unless you can somehow convince one other person in this class that God is true. He worked on his message and he got up there and poured his heart with the best arguments he could come up with why God is alive and there is a God. And then he said, is there one of you? Is there one of you that's willing to stand and say, I believe that God is true? The camera sweeps over face by face. And then all of a sudden, one young Chinese Oriental young man stands up. And then another. And then a young girl. And then another. And pretty soon the whole classroom is standing for God. Declaration of Independence. They finally came to this moment. We've written it. What are we going to do? Going to sign it. One by one they stood and went to the front. John Hancock said, let me sign it big enough so that King George can see it, who it is. And every one of them stood and said, we're going to make a new country. They stood. I was at a funeral for Bill Loveless over in Loma Linda a while ago, and he died. A great friend of mine. Probably 1,800 people there, every seat in the church filled. And someone said, if you felt like you were a personal friend of Bill Loveless, would you stand? The whole crowd. How can one man have 1,800 friends? But he did. We stood. Said, I was a friend of Bill. Willing to stand. We have a son teaching over in Arizona. He had to take some test for his teaching credential. And the test came out on Sabbath. He said, Dad, what can I do? You know, I said, you can't take it. He said, Dad, I have to. I said, what do you mean you have to? I said, people have died for the last thousands of years for the Sabbath. You can't do that. I said, you can find a Sunday test site. He said, you can do that? Yes. He worked it out. He stood. The book of Revelation has everybody standing. If you go to Revelation 7, there's the great multitude. It's all standing for God. Revelation 14, here they are, standing around the throne of God. You go to Revelation 15, and they are standing on the sea of glass. Standing. Heaven is standing room only. Heaven is only for those who are willing to stand. I know we're not in a church where I can have you stand. If there's any area in your life right now that you know you probably ought to be standing, you're giving into the crowd, and you're bending somewhere and you know you probably shouldn't. There's a voice like Pilate's wife saying, no, don't do this. Take a stand today. This Easter, stand for Jesus and say, I will never compromise. I will never give in. You can count on me. I'm going to stand for Jesus no matter what. God bless you.